Okay, let's dig into this. If you've been following the auto world or maybe the stock market recently, you've probably heard the name VinFast.
Oh, yeah. Hard to miss.
Right. The company often called the Tesla of Vietnam, huge buzz initially, massive global plans right out of the gate.
Hmm.
A stock market launch that was, frankly, wild to watch. And then, well, a pretty significant change in direction, especially after hitting some bumps in the road in the West.
That's right. We've been looking through a whole stack of source material here, articles, analyses, reports, really trying to piece together what went on, why their journey took these unexpected turns, and where they're putting their focus now.
It really is a fascinating story.
It is. It's a great case study, really, of these huge ambitions meeting the, let's say, complex realities of the global car industry.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to take all these sources, pull out the key insights, the important bits of information, and help you understand these strategy shifts and, what they actually mean.
Think of it as us doing the reading for you, basically,
Yeah.
getting you up to speed beyond just the headlines.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. Let's see what these sources tell us about VinFast's journey so far.
Okay, so looking at the sources, the first thing that really jumps out is just how incredibly bold that initial strategy was.
Bold is maybe an understatement.
Maybe. They describe VinFast's plan as being global from the start. This wasn't, build up slowly at home, test the waters, then maybe expand. No.
Not at all. The sources say their stated goal was pretty explicit. Do in just a few years what took companies like, say, Hyundai and Kia decades to pull off.
Yeah, become major players internationally, especially targeting the U.S. and Europe, right away.
And they weren't aiming low either. They launched with these quite high-priced electric SUVs, the VF8 and VF9, specifically for those Western
It
markets.
was super aggressive. I mean, trying to skip those steps of proving your tech, your quality, building brand trust in maybe less demanding markets first, that's unusual. The sources really highlight the sheer scale of the ambition was kind of unlike most other newcomers we see.
And that ambition, it sort of hit this fever pitch moment, didn't it? August 2023, the NASDAQ listing.
Oh, absolutely. If you were paying any attention to the markets then, you couldn't ignore it. The sources call it a frenzy.
What were the specifics again? The numbers were pretty startling.
They really were. So the sources report the initial listing price was just over $20 a share.
Okay.
But then within just 2 weeks, the price shot past $82.
Wow. That's a 275% jump in 14 days?
Exactly. Just nuts.
And this is where it gets really interesting, maybe a bit head-scratching, according to the sources. At that peak, they note VinFast's market cap topped 200 trillion Korean won.
Which for a short time put it ahead of the combined value of giants like GM and Ford.
Combined,
and kind of put it in the same valuation ballpark just for that moment as Tesla or Toyota. It sounded almost unreal for such a new player on the global scene.
Okay, but the sources pretty quickly pour some cold water on that, right? They call it an optical illusion.
Yes, and this is really the crucial point here. That massive surge, it wasn't really about amazing performance or some tech breakthrough or suddenly selling tons of cars. It was mostly driven by a basic market mechanic, an extremely low public float.
Low public float. Okay, break that down for us. What does that mean exactly?
It just means that a tiny, tiny fraction of the company's total shares, the sources say less than 1%, were actually available for regular people, the public, to buy and sell on the stock exchange.
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%. The vast majority, like 99%, was still held tightly by the chairman and his family. So when you have so few shares out there publicly, even a relatively small number of buy orders can just dramatically inflate the price because there's hardly any supply to meet even a little bit of demand.
Okay, I get it. So the price wasn't really reflecting the company's fundamental value or sales, but more just the scarcity of the stock itself on the open market.
Precisely. It was a stock structure thing, a supply-demand dynamic that created this, artificial price bubble.
And predictably.
Predictably, yeah.
Yeah.
The sources detail what happened next. Once that technical factor kind of wore off and the price was so disconnected from reality, it started falling sharply. By May 2025, the price was down over 90% from that peak, trading around $3 a share.
Wow. That really puts that initial frenzy into perspective.
It certainly does.
And while all this was happening on the stock market, the sources also point out that on the ground, VinFast was facing some very real hurdles in those target markets, the US and Europe. the rapid success they hoped for wasn't really materializing.
No, the sources are pretty blunt about the challenges. They list things like, well, low brand awareness compared to the established players. That's a big one.
Sure.
Questions around vehicle quality, software glitches were reported pretty widely.
Yeah, I definitely remember seeing quite a few critical reviews from car websites around the time the first cars landed.
Exactly. Those reviews, plus reports the sources mention about um, driving performance controversies, negative charging experiences. It all added up to a pretty tough launch.
And I guess for a newcomer, especially one trying to play at the premium end of the market against Tesla, VW, Hyundai, Kia, those kinds of early issues are particularly tough.
Very tough.
Mhm.
Because consumers in the US and Europe, they have really high expectations, especially at those price points. And they have lots of other proven, trusted options to choose from.
So these weren't just small teething problems. They kind of hit right at the heart of their strategy, entering strong with these higher end models. What was the actual result in terms of sales, according to the sources?
Well, sales to the general public in the U.S. were very small. The sources mentioned some industry estimates suggesting that a lot of the early U.S. deliveries actually went to the Vietnamese community.
Ah, okay. So not really breaking into the wider market initially.
Right. It just highlights how incredibly difficult it is to crack those established markets without that proven track record and, frankly, near flawless execution from day one.
And following these struggles, the sources show pretty clear evidence that VinFast has, well, pulled back quite significantly in the West.
Yeah, the retreat is quite noticeable. In Europe, the sources say they've closed almost all their showrooms and service centers. We're talking places like France, Germany,
Key markets.
key markets, yeah. And reflecting that, there were reports of major job cuts. Sources mentioned layoffs hitting something like 90% of their European staff.
90%. Wow.
So it looks like they're switching to a much smaller indirect sales model in Europe now, using third-party dealers instead of their own big retail network.
Okay, and what about the U.S.? That was the other huge target.
Yeah, a similar story, really. Sources report they closed 38 of their direct sales stores across 16 states.
38 stores.
Yeah. Now, some reports called it a temporary suspension of sales, but it's definitely a big step back from that initial direct-to-consumer push.
And maybe the clearest signal of this pullback is the delay to that huge factory they planned in North Carolina, right?
Exactly. That $4 billion plan. Sources now say it probably won't be up and running until closer to 2028.
So summing up this part, the sources basically describe this whole shift in the US and Europe as VinFast taking a step back and observe, hitting pause on that aggressive expansion.
Precisely. Not pulling out completely, it seems, but definitely hitting the brakes hard on that original plan for immediate, large-scale market penetration there.
Okay, but this isn't just a story of retreat. The sources show a clear pivot, a new strategic direction emerging. If the West turned out to be harder than expected, where are they focusing their energy now?
The new focus is very clearly on Asia. They're concentrating efforts much closer to home. Particularly Southeast Asia, sources mention Indonesia, the Philippines, and also India as key targets now.
And this isn't just talk, right? The sources point to concrete actions.
Oh yeah, definitely. They're actively building an assembly plant in Tamil Nadu, India. Sources expect that to be running quite soon, actually late June 2025. And there are plans for another factory in Indonesia on Java, aiming to start production by the end of 2025. So you see tangible investment shifting towards Asia.
And how does this Asian focus fit into their bigger picture goals, like hitting delivery targets?
Well, the sources state pretty clearly that hitting their 2025 global delivery goal, they're aiming for 200,000 EVs, now really depends on ramping up sales in these Asian markets.
Right. So the initial hope for big numbers from the US and Europe short term seems to have been replaced by this regional focus.
Exactly. This pivot is now central to hitting that big 200,000 number.
Now, it's important to point out, as the sources do, that VinFast isn't exactly starting from zero in Asia. They have a very strong position in their home market, Vietnam.
Absolutely crucial point. Their success in Vietnam is the foundation here. The sources give us numbers.
Oh,
Cumulative EV deliveries in Vietnam, just through March 2025, were around 35,100. That gives them clear market leadership at home.
And they're outselling some big established names there, aren't they?
Yeah, based on those figures, the sources point out they're currently ahead of Toyota, Hyundai, Ford, Mitsubishi, Mazda, Kia, within Vietnam itself.
That's significant.
It is. And this domestic strength built partly through what sources call patriotic marketing, and now what they term a low-tier strategy with more affordable models, seems to be the launch pad for expanding into nearby countries. They're trying to leverage that local success.
Okay, so let's try and connect all these dots. We've seen VinFast go from this huge global ambition, that kind of bizarre stock market roller coaster,
Hmm.
through some serious challenges in the West, leading to a strategic pullback there, and now landing on this clear pivot to focus on Asia, building out from their strong base in Vietnam.
And the sources offer some perspective on this whole arc. Some suggest that maybe that initial global from the start idea was, looking back, perhaps unreasonable, maybe even wrong.
Implying what? That they should have started smaller, closer to home?
Yeah, the underlying insight seems to be that trying to just leapfrog the whole process, building scale, refining the product, establishing the brand in maybe slightly easier or closer markets first was just incredibly difficult and expensive.
So the thinking is maybe dominating a region like Southeast Asia first would have been the more logical path?
That appears to be the perspective coming through in some of the analysis, yes. Build your manufacturing base, your supply chains, your brand recognition in a region where you already have some advantages, geography, maybe culture, and where the competition or consumer expectations might be slightly different than the super mature US or European markets.
Master your own backyard first, basically.
Sort of. Master a large region, gain scale and experience, and then maybe take on the global giants everywhere else. Sounds like a potentially more sustainable approach.
A tough lesson learned, maybe. And an expensive one.
Seems that way. And looking ahead, even with this pivot to Asia, the sources are quick to point out it's not like it's going to be a walk in the park either.
No easy wins there.
Far from it. The big challenge they face expanding across Asia is competing directly against those very same established players,
Yep.
the Korean and Japanese automakers.
Hyundai, Kia, Toyota, Mitsubishi.
Exactly. Those guys have been deeply embedded in those Asian markets for decades. They have strong dealer networks, trusted reputations, everything. VinFast still has to find a way to carve out space, either through differentiation or competing hard on price and value.
It's definitely a complex story still unfolding. From that initial Tesla Vietnam buzz, the wild stock ride, the fall, the struggles in the West, and now this strategic shift back towards Asia, leveraging their home success.
Yeah, and our goal here in this deep dive was really just to use the source material we had to lay out that journey, understand the key moments, the strategic shifts, the why behind the headlines as best we can.
And it definitely leaves us with a big question to chew on, doesn't it? As their story continues, especially in Asia, given what VinFast went through, launching big globally, hitting major roadblocks, then pivoting regionally, does their experience suggest that maybe mastering a regional market like Southeast Asia is almost a necessary first step, a prerequisite before a newer automaker can realistically challenge the big dogs in places like the US and Europe?
Or is their story maybe more unique, tied to their specific execution challenges, the timing, the particular market conditions they faced?
It's definitely something to think about. Is that regional dominance the new playbook, or was VinFast's journey just VinFast's journey? Something for you, the listener, to mull over.